Summer camp is over. Kids are heading back to the classroom. But are U.S. schools leaving children behind? Education Secretary Arne Duncan is with us here in the studio. Thank you for coming in, Mr. Secretary.
Thanks so much for having me.
56 million kids going back to school these next few weeks. What grade would you give the schools they're going back to?
It varies tremendously, as you know. Our best schools in the country, I think, are the best schools in the world, and we should be learning from them and replicating them and building upon those successes. We have a lot of schools that are maybe not world-class yet, but they're improving every year, and we need to continue to invest in them and support those teachers and principals and help them continue to grow and develop professionally. But I've been arguing, as you know, that we have a small percent, you could argue 1% of schools at the very bottom, where we need fundamental and dramatic change.
Is there an average grade you can give?
I'd say B, but we have a long way to go, to be honest. We have a long way to go. If we want our children to compete for jobs in the international economy, we have to dramatically improve. And so I'm not interested in maintaining the status quo. We're pushing very, very hard for fundamental reform.
I mean, as you know, liberals have long argued the problem is we don't spend enough money in education. The best schools are the best funded. Conservatives argue, no, you can't throw money at it. You have to reform. You have to change that educational structure. Who's more right?
The truth's always somewhere in the middle. We're trying to do both and. As you know, because of the President's tremendous commitment and Congress's support, we have over $100 billion in new money for education. Early childhood, K-12, higher ed as well. But you and I both know that money alone doesn't begin to solve the problems, and that without dramatic reform, we won't get where we need to go. And the President's drawn a line in the sand. He said by 2020, we have to again lead the world in the percent of college graduates. Lots of folks here, I believe, still think we do lead the world. In fact, we've really lost our way. We're stagnated. We've flatlined. Other countries have passed us by.
You're out there pushing educational reform with an unlikely duo, Al Sharpton and Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich, one of the most vociferous critics of this president. You three don't really agree on education, do you?
Quite a team, isn't it?
It is.
We're going to have some fun, but what we're really trying to show that you're right, people who from very, very different walks of life, very different political ideologies. I think if there's anything as a country we can come together behind in a non-ideological manner, it's behind education.
Charter schools, public institutions that are run independently, they're part of the public system. Your race to the top, $4.35 billion. You really are dictating to the states, aren't they, that they've got to have more charter schools?
What we're saying is that we have to push innovation. And what I've always said is I'm not a fan of charters, I'm a fan of good charters. And for charters to be successful, a couple things have to be in place that often aren't in place in states. First, you have to have a very high bar to entry. This is not let 1,000 flowers bloom. I think the right to educate children is really a sacred obligation, and states and districts should only be picking the best of the best to open charters.
Right.
Once you pick the best of the best, two things have to happen together in concert. One, these are by definition education entrepreneurs, innovators. You have to free them from bureaucracy. You have to give them the space to be creative and to create their school culture. Secondly, you have to hold them accountable for results. And either one without the other won't work. But when you pick the best of the best, when you give them clear autonomy and clear accountability, we're seeing great things happen.
Well, we are. You note that, but there, as you know, this summer there was a Stanford University study that showed 17% of charters, a lot in high poverty areas, really do produce a lot better outcomes than their counterparts. But 37%, I think they said, don't produce better outcomes.
Well, I've pushed the charter community very, very hard, and I've said this is one of the most important education movements of our generation. But where they allow second and third-rate charters to continue to exist, they do themselves and the movement a great disservice. And what we have to have is again, real clear accountability.
One of the other huge controversies, as you know, is linking teacher pay evaluation to student performance. Now, you've said that's just one of several criteria. The teachers union, the head of the NEA, disagrees, says, no, I'm sorry, what you're doing is you're just going to get more test prep. Why is he wrong?
What's so important, I think, in education, Al, is that we've been scared to recognize excellence. In every other profession, your profession, in business, in the media, in sports, in the arts, we always recognize excellence. We know who the great performers are. We learn from them. We help them teach others. We put them in a position to be master teachers. Somehow in education, we've been scared to talk about excellence. I think that has to change.
As you said earlier, you are throwing unprecedented amounts of spending, unprecedented amounts of money on education, $100 billion in the stimulus package, $4.35 of the race to the top. Do you have any concern that you'll spend this money now? It is reasonably short term, and that some states and some districts will make some changes, but since you're not writing it into law, the changes, that they'll go back to the old ways afterwards?
Well, what we have here is unprecedented resources on a discretionary level. That race to the top, which is so important. And what we want to do is invest hundreds of millions of dollars in states, in districts, in nonprofits that are willing to challenge the status quo and behave in very, very different ways. High standards, great data systems, getting great teachers and principals to underserved communities, turning around struggling schools. We're going to work with a relatively small number of states and districts. They're going to lead the country where we need to go. And when we can demonstrate what's possible, we can demonstrate success. I think that's going to be so important for the country long term. But I think about your point every day. This money will be gone over the next 2, 3, 4 years. We're trying to push with this money the kind of reform that will last for the next several decades. That's the goal.
The College Board estimates that a private 4-year college tuition today is on average about $25,143. Has private tuition gotten out of hand?
It's very, very high, and I worry about this a lot. At a time when going to college has never been more important, it's never been more expensive, and as you know, our country's families have never been under more financial duress. So we're doing two things. North of $30 billion, the most money since the GI Bill, to increase Pell Grants, Perkins loans, tuition tax credits, to help families take that step and send their child to college. Secondly, I think you're going to see over time, you're seeing some universities raise tuition way at a much faster rate than the rate of inflation. You're seeing other universities go in the opposite direction. No frills campuses, 3-year degree programs. And our students, our parents are very smart, sophisticated. There are thousands of choices. And I think over time, you're going to see universities that get out of whack with reality. I think people are going to vote with their feet.
Would you like to use your bully pulpit, as you have in other areas, to try to get private colleges to hold down those tuition costs?
We've been talking about that a lot, and that's a piece of the problem. The other problem in the higher ed side is we have not focused on attainment, on completion, on graduation. We have to do much more, not just to get students in the door, but to talk about completion, getting that college diploma in their hand.
Mr. Secretary, now for the big final question. You were a basketball star at Harvard.
Long time ago.
Some say that's an oxymoron.
I'd agree.
This is a different sports season, football season. Should the NCAA do away with the BCS bowl system?
I'm not the expert on this. I know the president thinks they should, so I think I'll follow the thought.
You're going to stick with the president on that.
Stick with my man.
Secretary Duncan, thank you so much for being with us today.